Good morning. First thing in the morning here in Taiwan, Hong Kong. We're looking at egg tarts at金園Gold Garden. This is one of the most iconic egg tarts in Hong Kong. Also one of my personal favorites. Sifu is starting to make the egg tarts right now. Let's see what's happening. This place opens at 6:30 in the morning. They're one of the few茶餐廳 left that have a full bakery program, including things like egg tarts that come out fresh every single day. Welcome to the back of the茶餐廳. So this is I would say, pretty typical茶餐廳 bakery setup. You have your chillers, you have your mixers, dough dividers, this old school oven, and benches for working the dough. Hong Kong style egg tarts. There are two primary types of dough. The first is called a sui pei, dough that's primarily flour, a little bit of milk, a little bit of eggs. It's kind of like a pie crust dough. The second dough is the yao pei, so that's the fat dough. That fat dough in this case is a lard dough. Despite being called a dough, it's primarily lard. Both are based off of low gluten, low protein flour. So what we're looking at here is the lard dough. It starts with flour. Low gluten, low protein flour. You don't want a lot of gluten development because you don't want chewiness, you want flakiness, you want crumminess. And now an important addition is milk powder for that milky flavor. Milk powder also is going to caramelize really quite nicely, and when the egg tart is finished baking, it's going to be a nice deep golden brown. And here's the lard, rendered off-site, nice and clean, bright white. Lard, unlike butter, is lower in moisture content and has a higher melting point. As a result, it disperses itself throughout the dough. In combination with the lamination technique, you don't get distinct layers the way you would, let's say, in a croissant. And here's a little bit of vanilla extract, which is a personal preference. Give it a little bit of that Western flavor. The end result is going to be a relatively stiff dough. Chef has to work quite quickly because once this is done, he needs to portion them out into the trays, which are going to be chilled overnight before they're used tomorrow. You might be familiar with lamination via viennoiserie or like pastries like croissants and so on and so forth, but lamination in Cantonese baking is a little bit different. Obviously, there's a European antecedent to some degree, but the way it's happened and the way we achieve that flakiness is significantly different. First things first is when we're looking at the dough, it's actually two types of dough. This on the top is called sui pei, which translates to water crust. On the bottom is yao pei, which translates to oil crust. What you can see that after it's been chilled, it's quite hard. After this has been made the day before, the chef is now rolling out and slowly laminating the dough. He's adding a little bit more flour. He's rolling it out just to get it into an even shape. And then he's going to book fold it. So the right and the left meet in the middle, and the whole book is closed. He's rolling it out one more time. He's going to do the book fold 3 times. 1, 2. That comes over the top. So that's 1 simple fold and 3 book folds. That's 128 layers. Whenever people talk about pastry on the internet, they like talking about how many layers blah, 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 blah thing is. That's not the right way to understand and taste the Hong Kong egg tart. Its flakiness is not by separation of distinct layers by oil, but it's a little bit more of an integrated dough. And I think it's not only just flaky, but it's also crumbly. That's what makes金園so good. You can see that after the dough has been rested, and with all of this rolling, the wet dough is now almost fully incorporated into the lard dough. He's dusting a good amount of flour over the top to make sure that it doesn't stick to the rolling pin. And once it's nice and even, with a little bit of force and the cookie cutter, he portioned out the dough for each egg tart. Chef's cookie cutter is ridged on the side, which is pretty typical of the flaky crust egg tarts. That little bit of texture on the side is going to prevent the egg tart from cracking when it bakes, but it also is kind of like a cultural expectation. And the dough goes back into the freezer just to chill, just to rest before it gets crimped. The center component of the egg tart obviously is the egg filling. The number 1 ingredient is whole eggs. Unlike the Portuguese egg tarts, it's full eggs, 1 egg yolk per egg white. First thing is the egg. The second, a simple syrup of white sugar and water. And finally, a little bit of evaporated milk. 8 cans per bucket. That's the recipe. The addition of the evaporated milk is a little bit thicker, a little bit creamier in consistency than regular milk. And as you can tell, it's slightly brown, giving it a little bit of that lick of caramelized milk flavor. Chef is whisking it together to bring it together. The emulsifiers are in the egg itself, which means that this is going to be one homogeneous mixture. That mixture is going to rest, and hopefully this is going to feed all of the egg tarts that he needs to make throughout the day. And now is the time to line the mold to set that tart shell. These stainless steel molds have been used for a really long time. So the first step is chef uses a bit of extra dough just to clean them out from the last bake, and places that pretty thick tart shell into the center of the mold. Using his thumbs, moving clockwise, he presses out the air from the bottom of the mold, leaving a little bit of a higher wall that reaches over the top of the side. The shape of the tart shell is pretty important for the final texture of the egg tart. It needs to be thin towards the bottom, it needs to be light and fluffy, and it needs to be tall. And without this technique, the egg filling won't cook properly, and it won't be flaky, crusty, and crumbly. And the last step, the chef is going to fill the egg tarts with a little bit of that egg filling before it goes into the oven. It bakes for about 20 minutes, but it really depends on the day and the temperature of the oven. It's coming out. 點啊？出爐啦！焗咗幾耐啊？20分鐘。When it comes out, you can see that there's a little bit of a dome shape because that water vapor is pushing up, so it's like it's going to depress a little bit after it comes out. 好靚喎今日。你覺得點？日日都係咁喎。日日都係咁。日日都係咁啊！日日都係咁。熱辣辣蛋撻出爐。哇，好靚嘅隻頭。Dude, it looks so good. So, I think part of the ceremony of this 金園蛋撻 is that it comes out every like 15, 20, 30 minutes whenever it's busy. Whenever they're running out of egg tarts here in the front, they tell it back and they bake another one. So when it comes out, the ceremony of egg tarts, of the smell of everyone watching what's going on, that's part of what makes it so charming. You can see the consistency, but all of these, part of the Hong Kong thing, I suppose, with bakeries is picking your favorite one. For me, I'd probably pick this one. You see that separation of those layers? And you see that little bit of dome, a little bit of caramelization. It's a consistent color. Okay, I'm gonna sit down, go in, sit down, get a milk tea, get an egg tart, see what the deal is. 要杯奶茶唔該。係熱奶唔該。We're cheating you a little bit because now it's the morning, but I think 飲杯茶食個包, this kind of tradition translates to have a cup of tea, have a little bread. That little bit of a bread or a pastry with a drink is a very 3點3, 3:15 afternoon tea type of thing for us Hong Kong people. It's a good place to chat with people when the restaurant is less busy. It's also a really good time to just, take a little bit of a moment to yourself. Oh. Quick pastry analysis. I'm not a pastry chef. I'm just happy to be here. So sides here a little bit thick. That's where a lot of that crumb is coming. The inside, the bottom it's thinnest around the edge here. You can see the layers of the lamination, but unlike a croissant, unlike a true 100% puff raisin dough, the entire dough is a little bit more brought together. So you can tell all over the plate, all over the table already. It's just coming apart. Let's go. So good. Actually, so good. The outside is so flaky. The lard, by the way, lard doesn't really taste like pork in this context. It's sweetened. It's it powderizes. It's all over your fingers. So nice and warm, gently sweet. Here at Gold Garden, they've been doing this for so many years. This iconic placement within the neighborhood like Taiwan, it's so residential. The fact that they're selling it out in the front and still making it in the back, the fact that it's so fresh, that's what makes Gold Garden's egg tarts so special. And this is the type of egg tart you can only get here in Hong Kong at Gold Garden in Taiwan. There's a lot more to eat in Hong Kong, so on to the next.